series of brown bag workshops particularly for the doctoral students, but also for the master students in the counseling program, both counseling, community counseling, as well as counseling psychology. The objective of this brown bag is to help particularly doctoral students to decide their methodology, but at the same time to motivate master students to get engaged in research, both qualitative and quantitative. So a certain number of Wednesdays, different faculty members of the department will give you some presentations. And today it's been given to me the opportunity to present to all of you a 4-part series on qualitative research. So there will be 4 different workshops on qualitative research. This semester, from September until December, I'll do 2 presentations, part 1 and part 2. In spring, I will do part 3 and part 4. There's a lot of information to be covered. I'm a new faculty. My name is Dr. Angelo Gomez. I teach the research class for the master's students. I teach the social and cultural foundation class, and at the same time I will be teaching one of the qualitative classes for doctoral students, as well as directing dissertations for both counseling psychology and counseling students. So that's the background, the purpose of these, and why we are here. So we're going to talk today about some of the important things and the introduction to qualitative research. For the doctoral students, it's extremely important because they need to produce a document at the end of the doctoral program, which is called a dissertation or a thesis. And that's an extensive piece, research piece, ideally that it's a contribution to the field, in this case, counseling. For the master students, you need to be well-educated consumers of research, and that includes both paradigms, quantitative research as well as qualitative research. However, despite of the widespread popularity of qualitative research, there is very little knowledge in general of what it entails, what it's supposed to look like, and what you are supposed to do in order to produce this kind of research. A lot of people think that qualitative research is about anything but numbers. And a lot of people lean towards that. I don't like numbers, so I'm going to do qualitative. But with that said, it's true, most of the time qualitative doesn't have much of the use of numbers, computation. However, it requires high-level thinking. And a lot of people believe that it's going to be easier, but in reality it's much harder due to the specifics of this type of paradigm to produce knowledge. Any kind of paradigm in research has an objective to produce knowledge that is usually based on a question. So a lot of people, to begin with, what leads us towards quantitative is a question. The question leads us to a form of producing knowledge or consuming knowledge, and because of that we end up in a quantitative or qualitative output. And from there we begin our research journey. So it is a question in essence, and how we approach the question that leads us towards a certain type of paradigm to begin with. So for the doctoral student, what is important to know, your research question has to be so clear and so specific that it has to say, without saying it, or maybe with saying it, that it is a qualitative study. But then, what kind of qualitative study? And why, by no other means, that particular question is answered. So the production, for instance, of a qualitative question may take several months. It may change while the topic remains the same, or the type of population, in this case we're going to talk about, participants, pretty soon when I learn these differences, can remain the same. The research question may change and evolve. And it does evolve with time towards a type of approach or tradition, and towards a methodology that justifies the use, or in this case, of a qualitative paradigm. So as master students, you're invited to be good consumers of research. You need to find studies that actually answer the question that they propose. And doctoral students are invited to create a question that demands a specific type of paradigm and a tradition that by no other means it can be answered. And if that's the case, and you end up with nothing but a qualitative question, then this is not suitable for you, this type of presentation, because we're going to talk about in particular how knowledge is produced using qualitative research. That's our introduction. So I would like everybody now, perhaps some of you have done this activity, but some of you have not, take a sheet of paper, each and every one of you. Most of the time people jump into qualitative without thinking that qualitative is a very particular type of research that entails three things that we often forget. It deals with human nature, first of all and above all. So it is in the differences that makes us what we really aim at uncovering, showing, explaining. Second of all, you as human beings are the instrument, whereas other paradigms use equations, formulas, hypotheses. You are the instrument. And third of all, as all types of human knowledge and interpretation, it's subject to variability from person to person, from time to time, and even within historical, socio-political contexts. Based on that, we're going to do an activity. So I would like everybody to stand up with your blank sheet of paper, the one that I gave each one of you. And we're going to have a ludic game activity that will allow us to understand a little bit about the three aspects of human research that we just discussed. So all of you have a space, and I would like you to stand up, okay? Make sure that nothing is around you so you don't fall anything. Close your eyes. Raise your sheet of paper over your head, all of you, and you feel you're both with both hands, and you're going to follow these instructions without opening your eyes and without consulting. Just follow the instruction. First of all, you're going to fold your sheet of paper in half without opening your eyes. Now, I would like you to fold one more time your piece of paper. Now that you have done this, I would like you to cut the two right corners of your piece of paper, as it is now. Cut the two right corners of your piece of paper. I want you to unfold your piece of paper one more time. Unfold it this time. Find the center of the paper and make a hole in the middle. Find the center of your paper and make a hole. Now that you have the hole, I would like you to, one more time, fold the paper. And find the two left corners, up and down of your paper, and cut those left corners. Excellent. Now you can open your eyes. All of you, you can open your eyes and unfold completely your piece of paper. And Ajana, if you can take these different types of shape of paper from the camera, please. Please show to Ajana so she can film the different types of results that you're obtaining. Yes, some over here. Good, Thomas. Good. You may have a seat now. Remember I mentioned the three characteristics of human research? But at the same time, to begin with, Contrary to the other form of paradigm that we have, which comes from the positive movement, while qualitative research has some steps, traditions, approaches, the result that the majority of you obtain, for instance, differs, even though you have followed the same instruction, which is the instruction from me, right? All of you were in the same room at the same time, listening to the same person, and do it at the best of your ability, follow instructions that I was giving you, right? That shows you that while we will talk about traditions and approaches, steps and forms, the result of a qualitative study, while maybe ingrained in case study, ethnography, narrative inquiry, phenomenology, or some other form of tradition, results in something different from person to person, even though they may have the same textbook or the same steps. And while some things have a better shape, like Thomas, can you show us yours, and maybe me?
Sure.
And pretty? Some are a little bit, more different, in different shapes. The point is that it is not necessarily that per se that it's a right or wrong way to come out about research, but it is the rationale and the capacity that you have to explain your findings, to make it comprehensible to others, and to understand how you came out to be this, or Thomas, or some other form, that makes sense to the reader, and it makes sense for you. On the other hand, this activity has another purpose. Remember I told you first to fold it and then unfold it? Contrary to other forms of research, qualitative research is not linear. While you may have a certain number of people to work with, or a certain particular question that you enter into the research study, not always that's what comes out. So that's why it's very different to produce research, which is the case of doctoral students, rather than to consume research as master students who are intended to be professionals, right? And to be well-educated consumers of research to inform your practice. Research is a very messy process, difficult, and also changeable for various circumstances. And we'll talk a little bit about this. So to very start with qualitative research is neither easy, not a neat process. So what we obtain at the end, those beautiful, well-written, logically ordered, pristine, well-explained, supported by research and APA-style papers that summarize a research study, often differ very drastically from what it was to be in the process or to produce a qualitative piece of research. So that's another talk about 3 aspects of research, and also the nature of this process. So the end product, which is often a dissertation with chapters and format, not always is just how it began or how it continued. And sometimes it's drastically changed at the end based on the point of ending, and not the finish point, but the point of ending of the research study, which might be nothing but a full stop within a continuing process of research. In qualitative research, you might always end up with a complete answer to your question, but rather choose to stop at a certain point when certain insights can be shared with others. So others or yourself can continue this research journey later on. And clarifying, explaining, expanding, justifying, or having a better understanding about the nuances that you have uncovered. That's another aspect of research. So all of you have these handout. So while I've organized some aspects of research, nothing replaces the actual process of doing research. Doing research in itself teaches you something that cannot be learned through books or reading. Not even reading pieces of research. This research process in itself, particularly when it's qualitative, is best and most learned when it's done. So you learn by doing. A very particular aspect that is different from other paradigms, where you are interested only in the results, the outcome, the number, the degree of significance. In qualitative research, much of the learning process not only occurs by the findings that you obtain, but by the transformation that the knowledge you obtain produces in you, which is a process of sensitizing yourself, of awareness, of clarification. That not even how many times you may write and rewrite a piece of research, it can never be fully, completely given to others. Many of the ideas that I share from you come from this textbook, Research Lived Experience, which is a manual written by Max McMahon on hermeneutic phenomenology, in which he discusses how research changes the researcher, and at the same time, while the objective of qualitative research is the production of a written text in reference to a human experience, no matter how well written a text can be or how good you can be with words and writing, it can never capture in completeness or fully or wholly the vast meaning of human experience. So rather, what we do in qualitative research, we take a piece and one possible, doable, logical end that you are capable of interpretation to be shared with others, acknowledging that the interpretation that you provide can be refuted, expanded, or better presented by others. So that's the nature, in some cases, is called qualitative inquiry, because you inquire about something knowingly, as in daily life you can see, you ask one person may tell you one thing, another person may tell you something, and sometimes it requires several people to put together an event. Or at other times, the different testimonies that you may be able to collect might differ completely from what really or what happened based on the perspective, position, time, location of the individuals. And because of that, qualitative research has a great strength about the understanding in depth from some participants, but also the weakness of what is shared, which is the limitation of being able to present often no more than one possible interpretation in a logical format, regardless of the traditional approach that you use to present that information. Collect, interpret, and present that information. That's another aspect. So that's why this workshop is done in 4 stages. Not necessarily because it cannot be methodologically shared in one, but to explain to the student the depth and the richness of qualitative research. It's not entangled with a particular outcome, but rather with the process. A process that is extensive, exhausting, and long. This type of research is not done in a rush, and it's not short. And in the next presentation, presentation number 2, we'll talk, and this will be part of the end of the semester, we'll talk about several myths of qualitative research. And the first myth that I want to mention, what we'll discuss in the next presentation, will be qualitative research is not easier, nor is neither easy nor short, but rather very extensive. And the second myth, qualitative research does not refer to a collection of interviews and then summarizing what people said as a common thing. Everybody said this, A, B, C, this is what's said. While truth can be found in that, that's not qualitative research, that's a poll. Qualitative research in itself is a philosophical stand towards knowledge and the production of knowledge, in which individuals go in a deeper manner towards the understanding, description, or showing of a human lived experience, which can be for one individual, typical case study, or several individuals to explain the stage of development, grounded theory, or about a culture in which these individuals live, ethnography, or the meaning that is hidden in the story those individuals share with you, or the capacity to find the essential components of what it means to live a particular type of experience, and that's phenomenology. And while I was trained in the phenomenological approach, I honor all the different various approaches, but it's not a process of approaches, but rather a process of understanding your research question. This is something that we'll discuss over and over. It is a research question that leads the research process, not the methodology. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Some of the objectives that we'll cover today are, will you read the first one? It's always fun to have people.
Understand the nature of qualitative research.
Thank you. Nicholas, number 2.
Understand the basic aspects of qualitative research.
Next.
Understand the main types of qualitative research traditions and/or approaches.
Understand the task of doing qualitative research.
Emilia, the last.
Understand the myth and challenges of qualitative research.
Exactly. Some of the myths. It's not possible for such a short process to tell you about all the myths, but I mentioned 2 of them. Qualitative research, one of them, it's not about interviewing people and polling them. What was the commonality among them? While truth may be found in that, that's not qualitative research. Qualitative research is a philosophical standpoint towards the production of knowledge, based on certain groups of guidelines that become traditional approaches that identify the type of knowledge that's being produced. Being produced because knowledge continuously changes. As you present your study, a possible new interpretation will come to your mind, or other people may see in your study. So before you start the process of understanding qualitative research, and that perhaps is one of the things that many methodologists have understood now, is that philosophy plays a major role in the production of knowledge. The positivist paradigm wanted to be anonymous, wanted to generalize whatever finding was to be obtained from a study. But qualitative research brings us back to philosophy, to the understanding of knowledge and how knowledge is produced, and the validity of that knowledge in terms of those from whom the knowledge comes and for those to whom this knowledge is shared. So, for instance, just to give you an example, and given the fact that we share this information here very often, is the use of John Creswell's book. He changed. He went from tradition to approaches. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was a very rigid format in which many disciplines were very intrinsic in defending their ground in order to exist. So there was a notion of traditions, following the tradition, respecting the tradition. But as the 21st century progressed and the postmodernist era kind of invaded different fields of studies, different disciplines, the notion of a tradition became more blurred because more and more individuals, and it is in our professional counseling, became more eclectic, drawing for different sources in order to do something, to reach an objective, to help a client. In qualitative research happened the same. Some ethnographers were critical ethnographers, some ethnographers were phenological ethnographers, some narrative inquiry was influenced by phenomenology, the philosophical approach. And while some scholars say that, like Miriam, indicates that all qualitative research is somehow is always phenomenological, there are certain traditions and approaches that have emerged, and we can name them. There are many possibilities to name these formats of qualitative inquiry. In this institution, we often follow Creswell because he has been the most widely quoted author in education as well as counseling. And he divides this type of paradigm in mainly 4 types of approaches. And his notion of approach is the understanding of philosophy. Philosophy is an extrinsic part of what it means to produce knowledge and to acknowledge what knowledge is and the validity of this knowledge. For the sake of our profession, and while we are very ingrained in the constructionist paradigm, we always have to acknowledge positivism because it has the most upper hand of what it is, of what it means to understand our profession. The positivist paradigm is widely recognized and respected. And a lot of knowledge is produced in this type of format or it tries to mimic this formatting to obtain validity and recognition. However, the movement that kind of is a reaction of is constructionism. And it's historical as well as a social reaction against positivism, because it talks about the construction of knowledge that recognizes multiple aspects of reality, quite opposite to what it is to the intention of positivism, which is a true experimental design, for instance. And constructionism refers to the notion of having a co-construction of reality through language among human beings. And because of that, I've chosen this picture. All human beings connecting with one another and with each other, creating the worldview. The world is sustained as true to themselves. Perhaps this is one of the best representation of constructionism and what it means to co-construct reality through language. Our profession, counseling, it's extrinsically connected with this notion because it is how our knowledge is produced. We talk to people, we reformulate things with people, and by means of oral communication, we hope to make changes in a person. This picture refers to Comte, who is attributed with the formalization and perhaps the popularization of the positivist movement, even though he's not the one who really started or founded it, but is often associated with him. Something that appears to be empty in our profession, always been here for a while already, is postmodernism, which is a stage beyond or after constructionism. And postmodernism has had a very strong influence in constructionism, where qualitative research comes from. And indicates this type of, there are multiple realities. So they're choosing different little houses. All of these are houses, and while all of them are houses, some of them may differ from one another. They indicate that in each one of them people can live as our ideas and our thoughts. Different schools of thought, lines of thinking. An idea in the postmodernism is not that just reality is co-constructed, but at the same time reality is found in certain aspects, the social constructions of reality which are already there for us. And at the same time, there is not a truth, but little truth. And the final answer of a research study to identify one little truth among the many possible little truths. So that's why it's extremely important to understand when a research study is presented to you, what is the philosophical assumptions and what are the principles that guide the study that you're reading. Because in essence, or perhaps in general, what a qualitative study is nothing but a possible interpretation of human reality from individuals. And it's a possible one single interpretation because you are one individual. And you interpret what you are capable of interpreting. You collect what you are capable of discerning from others. And you say what you are capable of saying to others. And those are some of the limitations of qualitative research. While some participants can tell you about certain realities and certain things, if you don't have the cognitive capacity because you don't belong to the culture, you don't know the language, or your lived experiences have they do not relate to what the person is saying, it may be hard for you to even realize what they mean, what they say, or what they're trying to convey to you. Another aspect is how good you are at writing. A lot of students struggle in terms of their writing. A qualitative researcher is a master writer. It's an individual who is able to capture human experience into words. And by means of those words, to provide an interpretation of a meaning of that experience. Ideally, for the individuals, they are co-participating in the construction of this reality. And while your attempt is to reveal a phenomenon, a lived experience, such as what does it mean to be raped for a married woman, or what is the rape experience of college students, so the studies that were presented a time ago here, or what it means to be an individual who recovered from a certain problem of, let's say, substance abuse. What you obtain at the end is an interpretation that is somehow post facto, that occurs after often it has happened. So what the individual is even telling you sometimes is not necessarily always all or everything that happened to him, but rather what has stayed with him so he is able to convey that information to you. Therefore, when you read a qualitative study, you also frame the understanding of that study based on the current situation and knowledge you have. So you reinterpret what's being presented to you as already an interpretation. Sometimes that reinterpretation has more validity than the initial interpretation. Sometimes the interpretation that you provide from a text becomes quite out of time, outdated, or not connected to who you are working with. As counselors, you always look for information to inform your practice, or what you want to do with that information. So we need to understand the philosophical approaches of research. That's why in every qualitative study, you need to have a philosophical standpoint from the very beginning. In philosophy, we're not referring to the abstract concepts with very difficult words, but rather the worldview that you bring into the research study, as well as the worldview in which the research study is found, developed, and eventually presented towards the audience. And the audience is always a readership, individuals who read a piece of knowledge production. Qualitative research, it's a journey, and a lot of people have a lot of problems and struggle with this, trying to understand that this is not about collecting data, processing, and an output, but rather a cyclical process, a process in which individuals enter and exit on an ongoing basis, because knowledge being produced and co-produced is not abstracted out of the time, the place, or the individual from whom that knowledge comes from. So researching about the data experience of college students in a regular public university may be quite different from researching that in a Christian school, where certain values and principles make the experience more tangential to the relevance of those individuals in terms of chastity, purity of knowledge, etc., etc. Does it make sense? So the knowledge that you obtain, while maybe the idea, the same topic, it changes, not only with the participant, also the context, and the interpretation, and the formatting. That's your interpretation of where the knowledge is coming from. The qualitative knowledge journey does not have necessarily always a start. Some of you may take, let's say, an ethnographic study, or a narrative inquiry study, or may read a piece of those traditions, and may be interested in that methodology, and you would like to learn more about that. And because of that, you start your journey here. I want to do an ethnographic study. Other individuals like certain tradition and approaches. They have a faculty or a seminar that's about phenomenology, and then you feel drawn towards that type of production of knowledge. It sounds beautiful, the language is very rich and very articulate, like a piece of literature. Other individuals like philosophy, like words, like expressing things by means of words, so your point of entry can be philosophy. Other people have a research question that they toss around for a very long time, and eventually find the output through a qualitative study. So there are many ways in which and points of entry for you to end up in a qualitative journey as consumers of research or doctoral students who need to produce a study, right? You enter the doctoral program with the type of population or an interest in the population or a topic that eventually leads you to a certain paradigm. But even when you are in the qualitative research study, you don't move and you are done. You study methodology and you're done with methodology. You produce a question and that question never changes. That's not true. Qualitative research is a journey. Sometimes the more you study and learn about this population, your philosophical assumptions change. That leads you to reformulate or reanalyze your question. A question that needs to be addressed through a methodological approach to be answered. A methodology that is always made up of techniques and skills to be produced in that way. And those skills belong to traditions, such as narrative inquiry, ethnography. But when you have that, you always question whether it is your inkling towards that leads you there, or it is actually the research question that has brought you there. And you go back again. That's why a qualitative study is not done in one draft, but in ongoing draft, and it changes. Your question might change, your approach might change, your themes might change. So what you obtain at the end, often in research journal, has been nothing but a journey. A journey has been traveled many, many, many times and reformulated. And at some point in time, the researcher decides to exit because the information or the way that he has presented, the information he's capable of conveying comes to a stop. Not a full stop, but a stop. This is the most or the best I can do to explain this. This is how far I can go with this at this moment. Or this is how much I'm able to express from the participants that I obtained for my study or collaborate with. Does that make sense? Then we have another aspect that is very important in an introduction of data. Is a word that comes from the positive paradigm. Usually we don't talk about data, but we talk about information, about themes. So when I chose the word data, I have to say that I use it for the simplification of all of you. Most of us have been initially ingrained into the positivist paradigm. But it's actually in qualitative, we talk about themes or threads of meaning. So I excuse myself for using the word data, but it allows us to give us a point of reference for you to understand that. In qualitative research, like a language, has its own terminology and appropriation of terminology, with false cognates and everything. And each tradition is like speaking a dialect of a language. And sometimes some dialects are completely unintelligible for those who do not have familiarity with that dialect. The information and the things that we obtain are the source of our possible interpretation or description of a phenomenon. And they follow a cycle because we don't talk with people only one time. Or ethnographers don't go to a village for an afternoon or a week. Or they don't take notes for one observation and then they are done. But rather, when we carry qualitative research, we talk with people several times. And we reformulate our question based on the previous conversation we had with them. As an ethnographer who goes to a place, a village, a town, a company, does not just observe one floor and is done, move to the next floor to collect new information, but revisits floors over and over again, several times, and observes similar events over and over to be able to fully understand that. That's why also the cycle of data, it's a cycle that is visited and revisited over and over throughout the entire process, including almost at the end of the process, which in a study could be chapter 5 for doctoral students. For the consumers of research can be found in the implications of research. And there is no point of entry, but we can say all data comes from sources, or is stored somewhere, or is processed somewhere. So the beginning process can vary for different people. But processing data or information or things has to do with the storing. Some things you can store as objects, some things you can store as spoken language, some things you can store nowadays through videotaping, some things is through paintings, poems, figures of art. So meaning from people has various forms of manifestations. And because of that, the sources of data change. For some individuals who have had an experience, they might not be able to articulate words, but be able to draw things, write a poem, sing a song, dance. And that's the source of information that you need to decode. Also, there are ethical implications about information. Not all information that we receive from participants can be shared or is suitable for our study. Or even when it's suitable, it can be shared without taking the risk of revealing who those participants are or the personal experiences those individuals may have that may traumatize them, but rather than help them to have a cathartic experience, it may traumatize them. The analysis, data is on an ongoing basis analyzed, because what you understand at the beginning of a study might change completely in the middle or at the end of a study, because your comprehension of the experiences of this field changes. Words that you initially didn't even pay attention may be extremely relevant as you become more ingrained into the culture, the stories, or the experiences these individuals are sharing with you. Next, the collection. What to collect? When people talk and as counselors we know very well, for hours. What do we really collect that makes sense for our study? And what we need to leave aside because it's not relevant? That needs to be revisited over and over throughout the process. Because at some point in time we can say these are the themes, these are the things people say about this. But as we progress and go on, we realize, well, some things are repetitive, but they don't really belong to the phenomenon. They belong to what they can say, but the meaning of their experience is hidden in certain things that they barely mention. They're still traumatized, they're still unable to touch that, or they're not ready to say much about that. One has been extremely important, or it is to our study. And we go back to the processing. How do we process the new findings and uncoverings? Does that make sense? That's why I present the cycles of data. We really should be the cycles of meaning-making process. And it should be the meaning-making process. So, now that we talk about the cycle of research as a journey, we talk about information that is up there, the cycle process. One thing that we need to understand is while qualitative research is often used as in singular, qualitative research and not researches or research types, it comes in various formats, multiple formats. And there are different scholars who agree on certain classifications and others have a complete rejection, or they come out with different classification. Creswell is often the author most often quoted in education, psychology, and counseling. That's why we refer to him. But he's not the only one, nor everyone agrees with him. But because of the work that we do, the acceptability that these traditions have or approaches, and because of the relevance in our professional literature, we tend to use this classification. But it must be said that it's not the only one, and it, by far, it's an exhaustive classification of the type of paradigm that we are discussing today, which is qualitative research or inquiry. But if we understand qualitative research as the production of knowledge in 5 different approaches, we need to understand what makes one thing case study, opposite to phenomenology, different from narrative, unique to ethnography, and particular to grounded theory. Case study is often found in counseling as well as psychology. And it refers to the threads of meaning. We tell the story about someone, a situation about someone. And what we're trying to do, different from historian, is not organize it chronologically per se. That would be an historian. Or find the sociological finding or explanation for it. That would be a sociologist. But we're trying to do is find the threads of meaning. What is the meaning of this? That's why in psychology counseling we talk about Maria, Tim, John, Peter. So what's the meaning of this? An individual diagnosed with schizophrenia may be completely different from another individual despite the fact that they may share the same classification in terms of diagnosis. That's why often we talk about cases. And a case study is usually presented with the word, the case of, the meaning of an experience of. Those are the typical wording. So each tradition is presented to you with their own wording, the dialect within qualitative research. And qualitative research can be, we can use a metaphor, it's a language that is divided in multiple and different dialects. And some dialects sometimes, if those of you who speak other languages know that they don't even resemble the standard language. Why they belong to a standard language? Sometimes the grammar and the syntax is so different that they appear almost like a different language, although they are classified within a particular language. Phenomenology is the other one, and perhaps the oldest tradition, but not often used. And perhaps it's one of the most difficult ones because it's usually ingrained very heavily in philosophy. often comes from the standpoint of philosophy. And there are various forms of phenomenology. That's why the phenomenologist not only needs to mention what type of phenomenology, but how is the study embedded with the phenomenology that they are doing. Saying this person works in advocacy, tell us where this person works, but doesn't really tell us the function. Doesn't tell us exactly, we know it's an institution, we know he has a tag, we know it belongs to that. That person can say his boss is Dr. Gill, but is he a faculty, full-time faculty, adjunct faculty, director of a program? Who is that person? So the mentioning of a tradition, it's not enough. Or the identification levels up, but actually how the study fits that particular type and format. Does it make sense? Phenomenology does everything here with meaning, but how information is presented is different. Phenomenology is not just about the meaning of this is, but rather showing how a phenomenon is there, how this phenomenon appears to people. Often it's about things that are taken for granted, or things that we kind of know something, but we don't really know in depth. Where there's a case study, it's about a person, a situation, historical event, but we're trying to find the meaning of it. We may have historical moment, chronological time, the diagnosis, but what does it mean? In phenomenology, a study is about something that it's there, everybody can point it or show it, but we have trouble to really define it and explain it. And because of that, we need phenomenology. Research and narrative inquiry refers to, is found in social sciences and literature. It's about finding the meaning within stories. Sometimes people can tell you a story, but they are not really sure what that means. They know it means something. Like in counseling, they tell you what happened to them, but they don't know exactly how that event changed them. Or from that moment, I didn't feel the same with him or with her. I knew my child was gone at that moment. So how does the stories come to happen? What happened in that moment that the person interpreted or discovered that something has changed because of those events? And that's why sometimes we follow a narrative inquiry. We know the story, what we're trying to dig up is the meaning of it. How that experience had that meaning for that person. Like in a class, people come to a class, can tell you about the class and the content. In a class, some students learn and click with the faculty, and some students end up hating the class. It's not for them. Same textbook, same time, same location, but meaning-making process changes for some people. Some people connect, and some people don't connect. The same thing with this presentation. Some people are capable of doing, understanding this very well and flow with it because they have that inclination down. And some people won't because they might not have the inclination, the understanding, or the previous experience that allows them to comprehend that. So sometimes things are not running either end. It's that the basis for mutual understanding and liking, it's not there. And sometimes we judge the other often, and trying to repress ourselves. But sometimes it's the process of humanity is a complex process of likes and dislikes, affinities and disagreement. Not always is something negative. Sometimes it's just simply it's not in our nature, or the way we learned, or the way we understand. And as long as we have peace with it, we're able to find what makes us take, change, improve, understand, comprehend, and improve. Ethnography is commonly found in anthropology. It's about the learning aspect of human experience. So knowing the meaning of it, knowing, being able to describe it, being able to tell the story, how it happened, when it happened, with whom it happened, how it happened. No, this is about culture. How this is a cultural thing that becomes a tradition, a custom. Or how a tradition becomes a custom that is ingrained in people, such as processions, believing saints, a certain religion tied to a certain country, a certain value becomes nationally ingrained, and that's what I am Nigerian, that's what I'm Italian, that's what I'm Russian. We also eat pizza, we don't feel it the same way that you do. But it's something that a person gives meaning or takes meaning from. And for them, that's me. That it's me. And the other person, I'm Russian, I eat pizza. That's not me, I just like it. So an anthropologist can tell you how this meaning came to be. And it usually refers to the cultural experience. These are the words that you may find possible. The last one, according to, is grounded theory. Highly criticized because grounded theory tries to conceptualize what is qualitative. These are the structures, step 1, step 2, step 3. These are the protocol, these are the format, this is the model how things happen and people become this. Not have anything against it, but sometimes it has to be there with the scientification of qualitative research, and because of that it's criticized. No, that is not valid, it's just the organization of human experience to produce a model is the objective of grounded theory. It's not the understanding, it's not the meaning, it's not the story. And then how a human lives a certain experience. How humans live certain experiences. That's what we're trying to do. So this is one possible classification that followed Creswell idea. For this presentation then, we finally have the introduction. So what we are introducing today in this presentation. Remember, this is part 1 out of 4. The TV series, this is the first season. Second season is supposed to stay in a film in summer 2014 and presented in the fall of 2014. Research has to do with the description and understanding of a phenomenon. So what is research in qualitative study? It's about a description and or the understanding of a phenomenon, human lived experience. So what is it about qualitative that is different from other approaches? The unique, because qualitative is very well known for using very few people. One person in a case study is more than enough. 5, 10 people in a grounded theory is top. Is because while we deal with the unique in every human being is also universal. Our cravings, desire for longing, belonging, being cared for is present in every human being regardless of the race, regardless of the gender. While the manifestation may be different, some people dance this, some people dance rock, some people dance vals, some people dance, salsa. In itself, dancing is a manifestation of joy, and it has different formatting, and because of the formatting and the design, some is salsa, some is tango, but in essence, the uniqueness hides and presents the universal of humans. So qualitative research studies the unique, a few people, maybe in case study 1 person, or a grounded theory 10 people, but eventually sometime, while it's not intended to generalize like in the post, we find universal things in every single human being or in every experience that we may study. The researcher, as a searcher of little truth, we are not intending to generalize, but rather find little truth that explains certain things, and how well we explain those things, we're able to understand that particular thing. Thing referring to a phenomenon, a human lived experience. Thing as referred to by Heidegger. The thing of the thing is the thing. And the thing is the thing because of the thing that has the thing. Funny way of using words. But a human experience is what it is for whom it is. It not necessarily needs a validation for others. But if it is that for you, it is that for you. And that is for you without the necessity of others accepting it sometimes. So the thing of the thing is the thing. It doesn't matter if it's just one thing for you and another thing for somebody else, but if that thing is that thing for you,